أفلح من صلى على محمد وآل محمد اللهم صل على محمد وآل محمد. أعوذ بالله السميع العليم من الشيطان الرجيم. بفضل الله بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم. الحمد لله رب العالمين والصلاة والسلام على خير خلق الله أجمعين محمد. اللهم صل على محمد وآل محمد وعلى أهل بيته الطيبين الطاهرين واللعنة الدائمة على أعدائهم أجمعين إلى قيام يوم الدين. قال الله سبحانه وتعالى في محكم كتابه الكريم بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم وإذا سألتموهن متاعا فاسألوهن من وراء حجاب ذلك أطهر لقلوبكم وقلوبهن. صدق الله العلي العظيم. And if you ask them for goods, then ask them from behind a veil. Surely this is more pure for your hearts and their hearts. When we speak about the concept of modesty and chastity, in fact, we are actually speaking about affa. In Arabic, this word affa cannot be explained by one single word. In fact, even when we try and speak in English, our ideas or our thoughts, we speak with words that are nearest to that thought. However, these words aren't always absolute descriptives of what we are saying. They're never completely that descriptive, and this is why sometimes things do get lost in translation, even from thought to language, let alone from language to language. And many of the words in all the languages, not to say a language is superior over another language, specifically in Arabic, sometimes it's descriptive of a feeling. Sometimes it's descriptive of many words. The word affa lies somewhere between modesty and chastity. And when we speak about the best of qualities, we cannot go past Muhammad wa al Muhammad. Allahumma salli ala Muhammad wa ali Muhammad. For they embody these qualities. In fact, they embody the peak and the best of these qualities. Specifically on this night when we commemorate this martyrdom of Sayyidah Zahra salawatullahi alayha, this most important event in Islamic history that needs to be commemorated and needs to be remembered over and over, because this is the core event that changed the whole history of Islam. This is the core event that all the efforts and every political ruling that has tried to morph or change Islam, the basis of it is the oppression of Fatimah al-Zahra. For we're not speaking about the oppression of a person or a personality, it's more than that. The people that oppressed Sayyidah Zahra salawatullahi alayha wanted to oppress the truth, suppress the truth, oppress and suppress the values of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. And this is why the commemoration of the martyrdom of this great lady is essential. And it's so important in our faith. Inshallah, we'll go into detail. However, with this core topic of affa and chastity or modesty, what makes it so important? What does our attire say about us, what we wear? What does Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala say? If you were to speak to them, He's referring to in the day of the Prophet. And even in this day and age, a similar thing happens. And this similar thing is that sometimes that the men are away at work, and some people, for example, a tradesman or a delivery person or anyone, has to visit the house of a person where only the lady is at home, the lady of the house, because the man of the house is out at work, for example. So in the time of the Prophet, they would go to the houses and they would ask for things. And so the Prophet said to them, Allah revealed this verse, that if you ask of them, this is in Surah Al-Ahzab, when Allah is speaking to the people about the hijab and the importance of hijab. He says, if you ask of them of things, do it from behind the hijab. This is purer for your heart and their hearts. That when you ask them for anything, make sure that there is a hijab in between, some sort of veil in between the two. Why? It creates purity in your heart and their hearts. That the hijab is an obligation upon both sexes. It's not just an obligation on one gender, but upon both genders. And specifically, inshallah, we will get to the point to prove that modesty or this affa is the greatest jihad in Islam. And so, when we look at ourselves, what does our attire or our dress code say about us? Whatever we wear, when we go out into the world, what are we conveying to everyone else? There's two main aspects. One of them is the aspect of the way it makes you feel, and the second is the aspect of the way you make others around you feel when you are wearing this hijab, or when you are wearing this clothing, whatever clothing that you choose to wear. In fact, that if you notice, throughout the world, different specialties and different faculties in every vocation and every walk of life wear different things to portray a different image. And this is why we have the concept of uniform. They place a soldier in a camouflage uniform, he feels soldier-like. Uniform being the word, he feels the same as his fellow soldiers. For example, they give a particular uniform to a police officer. Why? When the police officer wears this color, blue or black or grey, it's meant to represent authority. That when you see it, you see that there is authority there. If what he is wearing is clean and well ironed and well done, you see integrity, you see professionalism. That before the police officer even opens his mouth, already you have assumed these things about this person. Because the reality is, not every police officer is big and muscly. Back in the 50s and the 60s, this was a requirement. When they used to recruit police throughout the Commonwealth, it was a requirement for them to have a certain stature, a certain height and a certain size. These days, this is not the case. And so sometimes a police officer might stop you for a traffic infringement or anything, and you look at him and say, this man is small, I could easily knock him out. I shouldn't even have to listen to him, for example. But you never do that, because the uniform that he's wearing and the authority that he represents, you accept whatever it is that he says, you accept his authority, and you comply. And this all begins with the attire that he is wearing. It all begins with that, because it gives off that vibe, it gives off that impression. You are what you wear. First impressions last. That the way that you are dressed, this is the way that you will be accepted. There was once a great alim deen, and this alim, people used to read his books, but back in those days obviously they weren't mass printed, so it would be rare. You would travel the land to try and find these books. And this alim deen was well known, and people would love his books, but nobody knew what he looked like. And one day he attended a majlis, and he saw some ulama sitting and debating a point. He listened to them, but they didn't even give him the right to say his point. So when he tried to state something to correct them, they ignored him. And so he left. Little did they know they had disrespected this great alim whom they all studied his books. The next day he came. The reason they didn't accept him is because he was dressed in normal attire. The next day he came wearing his robe and robe upon robe and his turban and everything, and he entered. Assalamu alaikum Maulana. They all gave him this great respect. They then, not only did they listen to him, but they also invited him for dinner. So when he got to the dinner, rather than eating with his hands, he began to scoop the food with his sleeve. So they said to him, what are you doing? This is ridiculous. He says, you have invited my clothing to dinner and not me to dinner. That you have seen through my attire. And this is the truth. This is the truth. Sometimes we walk amongst people, and you see this in this country and other countries, who are ulama, who are muhaqqiqeen, who have this knowledge and this ability, and yet because they are not dressed in a certain attire, people completely ignore them. As if they're nobody's just walking amongst us, and they only tend to what the person is wearing. This is of the points of the importance of dress, and this is of the vibe and the information that we express by what we are dressed with. In the same token, whatever we wear has an effect on us. If I dress like a good person, and a good person dresses in modest clothing, if I dress in modest clothing, I will act modest. And if I dress in immodest clothing, for example, if a male goes out wearing a singlet and shorts, he's going to act like a person who wears singlet and shorts acts. He's going to act like a tough guy. He's going to have the 2 basketballs under his arms as he walks through the street. So on and so forth. This is the way that you will act because you feel that way. You feel cool and muscular because this is what you are wearing. In the same way, when a sister wears good hijab, she acts like a good hijab. When a sister wears no hijab or bad hijab, she will also act accordingly, or be closer to acting like somebody who doesn't wear the hijab, who's somebody who has taken away this layer of modesty and protection. In the same way, we spoke about law enforcement, or people that wear uniform. With law enforcement, specifically military or police, when they send out police or riot police, and they allow them to wear basically the onesie, the overall. And with the overall, they're wearing knee pads and shoulder pads and this big Kevlar helmet and glasses and a riot shield and a baton. They're ready to hit. This is what they come out to do. So they come out and they say, we've got all the equipment, we're ready. They actually feel like doing this. And they do. The reason they do this is because they're dressed for the occasion. And thus they will act like this. What we wear is so important on so many levels, to the way that we act and we react. We look towards the best of the best. When we speak about Ahlul Bayt being the best, if you read the history, and our history was not written by us, our history was written by the enemies. Because the victors are the ones who write history, without a doubt. You have a look at many events throughout the past, and you'll see who it is that writes history. It's the ones who win. The people, for example, who won the Gulf War, they're the ones that write what happened in the Gulf War. They're the ones that will deem something to be a war crime or not a war crime. To this day, they still celebrate aircrafts like the Enola Gay, the B-52 that dropped the atomic bomb on Hiroshima or Nagasaki in World War II and killed over 100,000 people, 150,000 people. By any standards, this would be an atrocity of war. And yet, no, instead, the man who flew the plane and bombed is a hero. And the plane is still kept so people can visit it and show how awesome this action was. Because the victors are the ones who write history. In the same manner, our history, the Islamic history, is written by the victors. The ones who killed the good people, the ones who harmed the good people, the ones who were able to eliminate a lineage of 12 imams after the Holy Prophet ﷺ, in less than 240 years, they were able to eliminate all the imams with the exception of Imam al-Hujjah al-Faraj al-Sharif. Yet these same people that write this history, go and look. Can you find one bad thing about Imam al-Sadiq? One bad thing about Imam al-Jawad? One bad thing about Fatimiyah al-Zahra salawatullahi anha? So on and so forth. All of the imams, you will see that they were exemplars. And they were the epitome of knowledge and akhlaq and ibadah, worship, everything. That they were the top and they were the best. In fact, there's a story where one of the Khulafa, he asks Imam al-Baqir alayhi salam, they are standing and they have bows and arrows with them, they're playing archery. And they're shooting the arrows and they see the Imam, they say, have a shot. And the Imam says to them, this is not what Allah has sent us to do, to sit down and play archery, especially as the Imam being an alim. And so the Khalif says, no, do it. And the Khalifs did much worse than this to the Imam. Some of the stories you read, we really can't comprehend because we don't look at them in a practical manner. You just imagine the most respected person in your life. Maybe your father, maybe your mother, maybe an uncle, maybe an alim deen that you respect so much. And then you imagine that person being humiliated. Imagine that person being arrested or dragged to court. It's too much to handle. It's too much for your heart to handle, honestly. But the Imam al-Ma'soom, like Imam al-Hadi, when the Khalifa al-Mutawakkil, he'd come up and say, here, drink wine with me. Let us have some wine and frolic. This is what he would say. This is Imam al-Hadi. Read a poem to me, for example. So with Imam al-Baqir, he says to him, cast the arrow. The Imam says, this is not way of it. He says, I demand that you cast an arrow. And so the Imam, to be safe from the wickedness of this man, casts the arrow. And he hits the bullseye immediately. So he is shocked. He says, how is it that you do this? So he says to him, woe unto you. Allah has given us this status that we are the best at everything. Whatever it is that we do, we are the best. Because this is Hujjatullah ala al-Khalq. There's nothing that they don't do the best. Everything that they do is to perfection, to set an example to us. This is the proof of Allah upon all of creation. And so when we look at the attire and what our Imams used to wear, specifically what Fatimiyah al-Zahra salawatullahi alayha used to wear, it's something that's been clarified to us in Khutbah al-Zahra, al-Khutbah al-Fadaki, that in this sermon, that is said by Fatimah al-Zahra salawatullahi alayha in the narration. The beginning of the narration speaks about and the particulars regarding the instance of what happened to Fatimah al-Zahra salawatullahi alayha chronologically are sometimes out of order. Again, because we didn't write the history. That ultimately there was no fair description of history being written. This is the truth. Because if you look at all of the Khalifs, and you look at all of the rulers after the third one, all of them used to pay money to get a hadith to say that I am good. Say that you heard something of Rasulullah, that I did something good, as in the Muawiyah ibn Abi Sufyan, for example, and they would do it. They would write something good. They would take something that was for Imam Ali, and they would put it. Otherwise, can you please inform me, where did the first guy get the name As-Siddiq al-Akbar? And where did the second one get Al-Faruq al-A'zam? Where did it come from? These are names of Amir al-Mu'mineen. They just took them and said, you know what, you can be a Siddiq and you can be a Al-Faruq. We can't give both these names to this one man. This is the issue that happened. And so when they have done this and they have written this history, but even this was not lost, that when Fatima salawatullahi alayha understood what the first had done, that even before the Prophet's body had cooled, they had already set this Saqifat Bani Sa'd, that is now, I think in place of it, fittingly is a bathroom, a actual toilet next to the Masjid of Rasulullah. In the courtyard, one of the toilets is literally where this Saqifa was, a small rooflet, that they plotted to take the position of Amir al-Mu'mineen. And when she found that not only that, they usurped the land of Fadak, which was a gift to Fatimah al-Zahra salawatullahi alayha. And so the hadith says, لَاثَتْ خِمَارِهَا عَلَى رَأْسِهَا وَاشْتَمَلَتْ بِجِلْبَابِهَا, that she placed her scarf, her hijab, over her head. So in other words, she would have been wearing clothing and the hijab, and then she اشتملت بجلبابها. She then wore what we these days commonly see as the chador. That she wore this aba over the top of everything. So hijab and double hijab. Modesty of Fatimah al-Zahra salawatullahi alayha. But I'm not finished. Don't forget that we hear this story of Fatimah al-Zahra salawatullahi alayha. The house of Fatima. The house of Fatima, where is it? When we go to modern day Medina and we visit the grave of the Holy Prophet, it's really hard to picture because everything has changed. But for the people that have been, if you go around, there's Bab al-Salam, where you walk in to say your salam to the Holy Prophet, and then you walk out Bab al-Baqi'. Next to Bab al-Baqi' is Bab Jibra'il. Over there is the house of Fatima. So in other words, Fatima al-Zahra, to leave her house and go to the Masjid of Rasulullah, it was attached. But for her to leave and to walk was a very small and short walk. That they attacked this house right near the masjid when they attacked. But when Fatima al-Zahra went out to face them, salawatullahi alayha, what did she do? And it's such a short distance. How many of us, for example, specifically the sisters, that if we're just going to run out and check the mailbox or something, you just put any half hijab on, a bit of a towel or something, just to run out, check the mail and come back, or it's a quick thing to go and do. Fatima salawatullahi alayha, she puts on the khimar, she puts on the jilbab, and they say the jilbab was touching the floor. It was so long. For the men, it is makruh for you to wear something long. But for the women, it's mustahab to wear something long. So long that it covered the feet of Fatimah al-Zahra sallallahu alayhi wa sallam. So long that it restricted the way that she walked. And her walk was the exact walk of Rasulullah sallallahu alayhi wa sallam. But it restricted the way and the manner that she walked. This kept this aura about her, this sincerity about the way that she moved and she walked. This is hijab in itself. This is hijab in itself. The attire that we wear is generally for us, it's something that tames us. Tames us. The origins of clothing. The first person to teach stitched clothing is Nabi Idris, or as Enoch, as is known in the Bible. Nabi Idris taught the people about stitched clothing. Now clothing in general, the reason that they wore clothing is two. One is to cover what is private. Number two is to protect us from exposure. We need to protect ourselves from exposure. The elements, if you look at any any form of survival, the biggest killer, be it in a battle situation or just a recreational situation, the biggest killer is exposure to the elements. That you being exposed to the cold or to the heat, this will kill you faster than a bullet, faster than anything. And so we wear this clothes to protect us from that, and we wear it to protect what is private, and this clothing has this effect. If we look at it, I spoke about the practicality of these effects, but if we speak about the spirituality of these effects. Have you ever heard of people called Sufis? Sufis are spiritual mystics that subscribe to Islam, and these Sufis are called Sufis because they wear suf, and suf is wool. The reason they wear suf, they wear wool, because wool is rough on the body. And when something is rough on the body, it keeps you in check. It's always a reminder. This is why it's forbidden, for example, for a man, or of the reasons, not particularly why, of the reasons, that silk has this softness, this soft feel amongst your body, against your body. The prophets used to wear wool. And wool isn't always the most comfortable thing. We are in the land of wool, but it's not always the most comfortable wool. And you wear it, why? It has a spiritual effect. And some of the people that used to wear wool, the Sufis at the time of Imam al-Sadiq, at the time of Imam al-Rida, and they would wear this and walk in the streets parading the fact that they're wearing wool. And so the Imam would come up to them and say, why are you wearing this? And they say that we want to wear what the Prophet used to wear. And they tell the Imam, why aren't you wearing wool? And so the Imam would bring them closer and he says, you have wool on the outside, but on the inside, you're wearing what is soft. Whereas I wear what is soft on the outside, and on the inside, I wear the wool. The point of the matter is that when we speak about this dress, it affects the way they are spiritually. It affects the way that you are spiritually. In the same way, depending on what you are. I'll give you an example. You try and pray. Even I'm sure a lot of the sisters generally, they have clothing for prayer. They won't wear the same clothes or that they are wearing when they go out to pray. Usually we have the namaz clothes. We wear the namaz clothes or the prayer clothes when we pray. With the brothers, it's not the same. But for the brothers, try, for example, just wearing a cap when you pray. It's a different feeling altogether. Try getting just a cloak to wear just for prayers. It's a completely different feeling. You have a different level of spirituality, a different level of sincerity in your prayer. Even your movements are different because of what it is that you are wearing. And it's something that's more spiritual, and the more layers, obviously, is meant to allow you to be more sincere in every action that you take. Sayyidah Zahra salawatullahi alayha is wearing this jilbab, but she doesn't finish there. What does she do? She camouflages in herself by numbers. She gets the women folk of her house. Min nisa'iha wa hafadatiha, and she puts them around her. And so they walk out as a group together. So Fatima is amongst this group, but so nobody can see. Look at this is what chastity is all about. This is what modesty, this is what affa is all about. The modesty that we are speaking about, this is what it's about. Look how many precautions Sayyidah Zahra salawatullahi alayha takes just to make sure she's in the correct attire, and yet she is going for absolute haqq. And it's not just about fadak being taken from her, but the haqq of the faith, the haqq of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, she is going to demand. And as she reaches the mosque, what does she do? As if that's not enough, she then demands that a partition of cloth, of cotton perhaps, is placed between her and the people. And then the hadith says that she sighed. After all that she had seen and everything, and then they also took her in her, she sighed. وَأَنَّتْ, the hadith says, and the people in the mosque began to cry. Just hearing that this is the daughter of Rasulullah in this position and in this state. Sayyidah Zahra salawatullahi alayhi, she gives us this. This is just one of the many examples, inshallah, of the few examples that I'd like to go through tonight, if we have time, of the attire of Fatima Zahra salawatullahi alayha. Why is this important? It is important for many reasons. Of the reasons, it's the commandment of Allah that we dress in modest and chaste attire. Number one. Number two, everybody wants a happy life. And everybody wants perfection in their life. Fatimah al-Zahra is the example of perfection. Mind you, we are speaking about an 18-year-old. All of this, she's 18 years old. Obviously, the status of Fatimah al-Zahra is greater than for me to even describe. However, these are the practical elements that we really need to look at and say, hold on a minute. If I want to get closer to perfection, and every human being wants what's best. Everyone wants what's best. You want the best car, you want the best clothes, you want the best house. This is what we strive towards. Otherwise, we would be living much different lives. We wouldn't be striving so hard to get to whatever it is that we want. And so, we want the best. This is an example of the best, unfortunately. In this day and age, we live in a time, specifically with the advent of this is the internet super age, if you'd like to call it. The internet has become so much, more than anyone could fathom that it would have became. Statistics all over the place, statistics like the highest paid jobs, 10 of the highest paid jobs in the world didn't exist 20 years ago. They didn't exist. Now they are. You have people that are network architects, for example, website architects, software engineers. This is a thing that didn't exist a long time ago. And now this is something that's huge, it's everything. And so, with all of this that has entered our lives and become part of our lives, the social aspect of all of this, I'm talking about, without advertising for these companies, our Facebooks and our WhatsApps and our Instagram and all the rest of it, all of these different social media applications that we use, these applications that promote immorality, that promote immodesty, this is what they promote. They promote the more immodest a person is, the more likes they get, the more subscribers that they get. The more immoral that they are, the more that they get. This is the way that it works. And you have a look at it, clearly this is what it is. Look at the people with the most subscribers, for example. Look at how often do you see a story of a woman that wore hijab? Doesn't exist. You see a story of a woman that took off her hijab, everyone's like, yes, the bravery of this girl, so brave, took off her hijab, excellent. She freed herself from the shackles of this ancient religion or something like that. And they give her likes and they subscribe to it. They promote immodesty and immorality. And now I'm talking about happiness here, not just in this dunya, in the hereafter. And the most important is the hereafter. Remember this. ما خير بخير بعدها النار وما شر بشر بعدها الجنة. The hadith says there is no good that is truly good if it ends in the fire of hell. And there is no bad that is truly bad if it ends in paradise. People may look, for example, at the martyrdom of Abu Abdullah salawatullahi alayhi and say that Abu Abdullah al-Hussein was martyred in such a horrific manner. And it really is a horrific manner. This is terrible, I would never like this. However, he was martyred in a horrific manner, but what status did he achieve over there? That's what's important. That is what's important. And some people, you say, oh, such a peaceful death. He said goodbye and he hugged his loved ones and he had a sip of water and he had peaceful, and yet that peaceful death may lead to where? To Jahannam. What good does that have? No good. This is the most important thing, that what happens in the hereafter is what is most important. And I will be reiterating this problem, this question all the time, and I have been my whole life. And this is the thing that keeps you on path, and it keeps you on the path. For know this, and I know this topic it's not within the topic. However, it's important for us to establish this before we can move on. Sallu ala Muhammad wa ali Muhammad. And so, know this, that if somebody leads the most terrible, the hardest life, and some of our forefathers and our fathers have seen hardship, real hardship, things that we can never imagine. I know, alhamdulillah, I think I've had a very easy life my whole life. But there's people that have seen serious hardship, people that have been jailed for nothing, for their opinion. They've been tortured in these jails, humiliated in these jails. People that had to travel over the seas to come in as refugees for a better life for their families. They've seen hardship that I can't imagine. However, the one thing that I know is that when you look at paradise, one look at paradise, even if your life was all hardship and difficulty, you will forget all of that hardship and difficulty. And if your life was all cream, wealth and riches and fame, one look at the fire of hell and that's all forgotten. I know this for a fact. And I'll tell you why I know this for a fact. Because sometimes you could be the richest person on earth with money and have everything, but you'll still be sad. How does that work? And sometimes you might not have any wealth, but you're happy. How does that work? You see it all the time. Sometimes I see a person, he has everything, but for example, he has no hair, like myself. And then he says, oh, if only I had hair, I would be happy. Let me go and, grow some hair. And this. It's not true, because there's many people with hair and they're depressed. One look at paradise, you forget all of the hardship. And one look at the fire of hell, and you will forget all of the ease that you've had in your life. And we go back to why I'm speaking about modesty, and why I'm speaking about chastity, and why I'm speaking about affa, and I say it's because it's for your happiness. Let's look at it from the dunya perspective. The dunya perspective, and this is something that, I wish I didn't have to speak about, but this is something that's a reality. That's something that's a reality in our world, in the Western world, in the Eastern world. It's a taboo that's not spoken about, and this is sexual harassment and sexual assault. Not blaming. I'm not victim blaming and saying that the blame is on the woman, she should be more modest. No, on the contrary. I don't blame the victim. But what I do say is that this is a danger that is so bad that it destroys lives. It destroys the chance of you ever being happy. That you think you are happy just by a little bit of immodesty, a little bit of dressing the wrong way. I'm not saying it gives them the right. It never gives anyone the right. But what I am saying is that is enough to destroy your whole life. And let me tell you something, my brothers and sisters, 90% in this country of these types of assaults go unreported. Why do they go unreported? Who's going to go and report it? Just imagine that you go to jail and you get sexually assaulted. Are you going to come out and say, well, that time in jail, the showers weren't very fun? You're not going to come and say this to the people, are you? You're going to be quiet about it. In the same way, could you imagine one of the sisters going into a police station and reporting and saying, oh, this is what's happened, to a man that might just take it as not seriously, and this is why 90% of them don't get reported. The modesty is for us to be away from even falling close to this danger. This danger is so huge and it is so rampant that the modesty is important for men and for women, that we don't fall into these problems. Because do you know how hard it is? You go and look at people who were victims of these types of assaults. Look at what their lives, what they have to go through. How many years of psychological help. Sometimes physical help because of physical damage. And sometimes this psychological, it's hard for it to even go away, the damage that's happened to them. And it could be from something as small as a whistle or somebody says something to them, it cuts. It could be a word and it could be beyond a word. This is why I'm saying it's vital for your happiness. We live in a world that exploits women, that judges women completely on their looks, absolutely on their looks. We live in a time, there's never been more plastic surgery ever in the world. The women and the men rushing to plastic surgery, rhinoplasty, the rest of it, all the other plasties without mentioning them. That they fix their faces, they try and fix their bodies or think they're fixing them based on what they believe should be the correct shape. But is this what we have been created for? Honestly, how much do we love the Ahlul Bayt? And we revere them, and we will die for them. We will give everything for them with a smile on our face. We will be happy. Yet does any of us know how they look? Anyone? No one knows how they look. Not one of us. We may have seen them in a dream, what we imagine they may look like. But how they actually look, none of us, yet we love them. Because the appearance doesn't matter. It doesn't matter what they look like. It doesn't matter what their body is like. It doesn't matter what their hair is like. We're in love with the values and the personalities of these people. We are in love with the status that was given to them by Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, and clearly for the correct reason. Allahu a'lamu haythu yaj'al risalata. How many of these stories do we have where the disbelievers turn around and say, oh, Allah, verily He knows where He places His message, that it is within these people. And this is why it is important that I speak of this modesty. And it is important that I speak of this chastity and of this affa for both the males and the females, that this is something that is essential for our lives. Fatimah al-Zahra, salawatullahi alayha, again. Allahumma salli ala Muhammad wa ali Muhammad. She speaks, or she shows us throughout her life, again, what it's like, or what you need to be like to be the best. You want the best, and this is how you have a happy life. Believe me, you will have a happy life. You will have a happy life because you won't have these issues in the dunya and in the hereafter. You will have a happy life, my sisters, because you will be judged on your merits and on your character and on your personality, on who you really are. Not what they imagine you to be. The secrets that the brothers don't know is when you see a beautiful girl in the street. This girl was awake before Salatul Layl, doing her face and her hair, for her to be able to walk out in the street in this manner. Honestly, hours before she even gets to the street, this is what she's done to make sure that she looks in this manner. And for what? For people that are unworthy. For the sisters, this is your capital. Your beauty is your capital. Would you give your capital away for free? Your capital should be invested in a man that deserves your capital. Simple as that. Someone that deserves to be able to appreciate your beauty. Otherwise, don't show it to the world and be as modest as you possibly can. Fatimah al-Zahra salawatullahi alayha, on a day when that man, Ibn Maktoum, enters the house of the Holy Prophet, and this is a blind man. Enters the house of the Holy Prophet. We all know the story, but it's a reminder. He enters the house of the Holy Prophet, and Fatimah al-Zahra salawatullahi alayha, she stands up and she leaves. And so the Holy Prophet asks her, not that she doesn't know, this is the lesson for us. That, oh Fatima, when he entered, he is blind. Why did you leave? Or why did you leave that room? She says, he is blind, but I can see. And his sense of smell is still fine. This is the modesty of Fatima salawatullahi alayha. That although she sees this, yet she moves away. He's a blind man. She moves away. She gets up and she leaves, showing how the true character of modesty has to be. In another famed story of Fatima salawatullahi alayha, and this is of the best ones, and it needs a bit of an explanation. However, the Holy Prophet asks his companions, أَيُّ شَيْءٍ أَفْضَلُ وَأَحْسَنُ لِلْإِمْرَأَةِ. He says, what is the best thing for a lady? And they all do not answer. So Amir al-Mu'mineen says, I went home and I asked Fatima. And Fatima says, أَنْ لَا تَرَى رَجُلٌ وَلَا يَرَاهَا رَجُلٌ. That for her, not to see a man, nor for a man to see her. This is what's best for a woman. What does this mean? Does this mean that you just box yourself up at home? No. This means that when it is necessary, you can talk to a male. You can talk to the opposite gender. You can see when necessary. This is the important factor. When necessary. If it's not necessary, then away with it. Because it's not worth the risk of what may come after it. In this world and in the hereafter. This is it. If it's necessary, we do. If it's not necessary, avoid. Why? Because when I avoid, I am doing what is best. This is the modesty of Sayyidah Zahra salawatullahi alayha. She is showing us the epitome of this modesty and the greatness of this modesty for us to take lesson. For us to take lesson. Lesson for us as men, as brothers, of sisters, as husbands, as fathers, to enable, to put these teachings amongst our women folk. Why? You give them a better life. Honestly, I speak about it, and I wish I didn't have to. But if you deal with the problems of society, believe me, these are the problems that are recurring all the time. Same problems all the time. These recurring problems that cause divorce. These recurring problems that cause illegitimate children. These recurring problems that cause people that are scarred. These are the negative effects, and as hard as they try, you have a look at the things that they try to do. We have legislation in this country, in Australia, in the most of the Western world has legislation against sexual harassment. However, the reality is most doesn't get reported. The reality is when it does get reported, if the man that committed it in court, if the man that committed it is clean and good looking, he gets away with it. If he's a bit shabby and dirty, he'll get convicted. And this is after the girl gets put through hell. The girl gets put through hell in questioning. All of this is so detrimental to one's life. Why even give it a chance? There's one final very important point that I'd like to speak about, and I know I've gone on for too long, and Brother Qasim told me that I can take as much time as I like, and I hope I haven't bored you and tired you out. But this is an in-between lesson. Like we have a lull in the Islamic season. This is that part of that lull where we're finished with Muharram, we're awaiting Shahr Ramadan, and there's sort of really, people sort of disappear away from the centers. And we forget one of the most important things that we need to remember, and this is the martyrdom of Fatimah salawatullahi alayha. Finally, I said that this modesty or this affa is the ultimate jihad. The ultimate jihad. In Islam, we have the greatest good thing that you can do. فوق كل بر بر حتى يجاهد أو يستشهد الرجل في سبيل الله. That above every good is good until a man goes and is martyred in the path of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. There's nothing above that. This is the greatest thing that we have in Islam. We have a tradition of Amir al-Mu'mineen. Two traditions that I want to mention. One is عفو عن نساء الناس تعفو نساءكم. That if you, the men, this is the responsibility of the men, are modest with women folk in general, then your women folk shall be modest. This is a rule. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala has said this through the narrations of the Imams, of the Holy Prophet, that if you are modest towards other women, then your women shall be modest. And if not, then God help you. And this is a true statement of the Imam, something that's very practical. Without going into details, the one I actually want to speak about is that this lady of light, salawatullahi alayhi, the degree of her jihad, أفضل الجهاد كلمة عدل أو حق أمام سلطان جائر. That the best jihad is a word of truth in front of a tyrannical leader or ruler. Sayyidah Zahra, with her chastity, the best. With her modesty, the best. The way that she wears, the best. And all of this towards doing the best of jihad, as the Holy Prophet says, saying a word of truth before a tyrannical ruler. Imam Ali alayhi salam, he says this beautiful tradition, truly great tradition. And inshallah, I'll finish with this and a short explanation of this tradition. He says, وَمَا الْمُجَاهِدْ فِي سَبِيلِ اللَّهِ الشهيد بأعظم أجر عند الله ممن قدر وعف ولكاد العفيف ملك من الملائكة. He says, Amir al-Mu'mineen, very important. He says, and do not think that the one who fights in the path of Allah and is martyred has a greater reward than the one who has the ability yet he is chaste. من قدر فعف أو وعف. In this tradition, the Imam uses the word affa. The problem is the word affa in Arabic is used for so many things. Too many things. It's used in terms of chastity and modesty. It's used in terms of frugality and asceticism. It's used in terms of pardon when one has strength over another. However, in this particular part, the Amir speaks about this word affa. And this word affa, what it means in particular, is that when you have that strength and the ability, that moment, that you are about to embark on something that is forbidden, and you stop yourself, you arrest yourself, literally arrest yourself from this, this is called affah. You know, when your desire is flared up and that's it, I'm doing it. I'm going for it. Maybe something haram, it may be something halal. For example, let's say it's something halal, you're on a diet and you see that chocolate biscuit staring at you and you can't stop yourself, and that's it. That's the moment that you've decided, you know what, I'm going to eat it, bit of a cheat, and tomorrow I'm back on the diet. And you're about to go for it and you arrest yourself. This is man qadara wa'af. In the same way, when you're about to look at something you're not allowed to look at. In this day and age, you don't have to walk out to the street for you to be subjected to this sort of exposure. That this sort of exposure is something that can happen within your own home, within your own bedroom, within wherever it is that you are. You don't even mean to do it. You've just got an Instagram account. What are the top 10 pictures that come up? What sort of pictures do you think are the ones that are going to get the most ratings and likes and votes, or whatever system they go by? In your Facebook feed, it's not me, but a friend of a friend of a friend is a friend that shows you something that can't be unseen, for example. That at that moment when you arrest yourself, this is what it is. There's a difference also. The Imam says that he talks about man qadara wa'af, yani who has the ability, and then he arrests himself. So the Imam's not talking about somebody that cannot do this because of the community that he lives in, for example. He doesn't have that ability. For example, let's say somebody was born in Najaf, raised in Najaf, in the area of Amir al-Mu'mineen salawatullahi alayhi, or in Karbala, or in Qom, or any of these holy cities, and his whole life he's lived in that city. And then when he dies, he says, oh Allah, I never entered a nightclub. Alhamdulillah, I'm a proper mujahid. And Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala will tell him, you had never had the ability to enter a nightclub, my friend. There's nowhere to do it over there. So you will be rewarded for not doing it, however you did nothing not to do it. As opposed to somebody in this day and age, anywhere in the world, that has access to internet, for example, or you're walking in the street, and you have that ability. If you stop yourself, the Imam says that you have a greater reward than somebody who is martyred fi sabilillah. This great thing. And you have the reward of a shaheed, and he says it is as if that this one is an angel amongst the angels. In other hadith, someone who is greater than the angels. My sisters, this is the same thing. That with our lives, with what we do, with what we wear, this is jihad in itself, in its essence. That when I am modest and I go out with this modesty, and the thing about hijab is digital. It's 0 or 1, binary. It's either on or it's not. There is no half hijab. That when I go out with my hijab, this is me like I'm doing jihad fi sabilillah. Because myself and everything within my being, for example, based especially living in the West, that everyone around me is sort of looks at me in a contradictory manner, or looks at me in a detrimental manner. What is this person wearing, for example? So alhamdulillah, as the community builds up, it becomes more normalized. Feel free to show your modesty and show your chastity. The Imam says that this affah, he says, don't think that the reward of a mujahid, shaheed, fi sabilillah is greater than the reward of one who does this, than the reward of one who does this. My brothers and sisters, this is something that we really need to take on board with ourselves. For example, for the brothers and sisters that have these apps, if this app, you know it's going to bring up those things, you were alive before this app, and you will live after you delete this app. You don't really need it. This is the truth. You honestly don't need it. It's a decision, personal decision you have to make. But these sorts of apps that do this, avoid them. It's not worth it. It's really not worth falling into this. I'm not telling you to just go off the grid or whatever. I understand social media is a part of normal life. But be careful. Be careful who you friend. Be careful who you add. This is the best way that I can put it. On this evening, when we commemorate the martyrdom of Fatimiyah Zahra salawatullahi alayha, that after the demise of Rasulullah sallallahu alayhi wa alihi wa sallam, the people conspired against Fatima al-Zahra. That they were all gathered together and happy for this to happen. People argue the story and they say that Fatima al-Zahra salawatullahi alayha, really was she, her house, was it really attacked? And Amir al-Mu'mineen was there. And who are the people that were standing? They named there was 8 people standing outside. This is not the case. There had been an army of mercenaries that was gathered up by the first, and he had taken over the whole Medina by this army of mercenaries. And when they attacked, imagine an attack like the attacks that you see on television. That when they kick down the door and they throw the smoke grenades in, or they throw the flashbangs in, this is the same thing. They lit fire to the house of Fatima salawatullahi alayha and began to smoke it out. Fatima al-Zahra salawatullahi alayha, she was inside this house and she heard the commotion outside and she called to them. What have you come to do? Did you forget who I am? Did you forget that Rasulullah said that I am a part of him? That whoever loves me, loves him. Whoever angers me, angers him. Leave. They said to her, bring your husband out. We want your husband to come. But at the time, Fatima al-Zahra, she had no hijab on, so she hid behind the door. The mal'oon, he heard that she was behind the door, and he crushed Fatima behind the door, salawatullahi alayha. As she was being crushed behind the door in the world, she called out, Ya Abata, Ya Rasulullah. She called out, oh Father, can you not see the position that I am in, that I am being crushed by this man who claimed to be your companion? Fatima al-Zahra, salawatullahi alayha, she fell to the floor. As she fell to the floor, she called out to Fudda. She said, Fudda, come and help me, for they have made me miscarry my baby Muhsin. Fatima al-Zahra is on the floor. Who comes and joins her on the floor? The one who, when he fell over, Rasulullah got off his maqbar and went down to hold him up. The one who, when we reach the maqtal of Abu Abdullah, when he falls off the horse, we cut the maqtal. Abu Abdullah fell on his mother Fatima. Imam al-Hasan fell on his mother Fatima. Fatima al-Zahra is in pain with a broken rib. Her child has been miscarried. She's calling towards her father, and she realizes that Amir al-Mu'mineen has been arrested and taken. Ya Ali! She calls out, Ya Ali! Where have you gone? She stands up to go after Imam Ali alayhi salam. Release my husband, she says. Or surely I will raise my hands in dua. I will take my scarf off. And so she raises her hands. This means not that she will take her scarf, but if she raises her scarf, the ghadab of Allah shall come down. And so as she is walking towards Ali ibn Abi Talib, she is walking towards the mosque. The cursed one, he says to his companion Khalid, go back and return Fatima al-Zahra. He goes back to return her. She says, I will not return till you free Ali. So he begins to hit her with the back of the spear. He begins to hit her on her side until he pushes her away. When he begins to hit her on her side, who is watching? Zainab salawatullahi alayha. Zainab has to endure watching her mother go through this beating. At Sayyidah Zainab tomorrow, on the 11th, on the night of the 11th, on the 11th of Muharram, when she is being carried away, when she's being taken away, and she must look after all of these children. Anytime they see the bodies of the dead ones that they cry, they used to hit them with the spears, with the sides of the spears, and with the whips, and not allow them to cry. The same thing that they did to the mother, Fatima salawatullahi alayha. On this night that we commemorate this martyrdom, may Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala have mercy on your tears. May Allah accept your rewards. Inshallah you remain so we can do some latum over Fatima al-Zahra salawatullahi alayha. Ya Hussein, Ya Hussein, Ya Hussein, Ya Hussein, Ya Hussein, Ya Hussein, Ya Hussein.